Hello and welcome to GMF Talk with me, Liz Shaw. Today we are going to talk about investigative journalism, and I'm delighted to be joined by the chair of the Journalism Incubator in Prague, Czech Republic. His name is Tomas Bouska, and he'll tell us a little bit more about how journalists are being trained in the country. Tomas, welcome to the program.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. First of all, tell us about what the mission of the Journalism Incubator is.
Right, so we're an NGO that has been established for the purpose of providing practical experience, practical training to the emerging journalists in the Czech Republic. But very often this touches also students of journalism from abroad, mostly from the Eastern Europe. So we're trying to connect young, motivated individuals with their senior fellows, colleagues in the established media. And we're trying to work on different topics that basically provide both topical as well as vocational skill.
So talk to us about the programs you have. Is it short-term or long-term training, and who goes through those programs at the incubator?
Right, so we typically operate in the field of the university semesters. That means programs are held for 2.5, 3 months in duration. And we focus on different topics. One of them is EU, that means EU issues related with the journalists that typically cover EU topics. Secondly, since we are rooted in Prague, in a former ex-communist country, we are operating also in the field of recent history. We are bringing young journalists to the fields of, for instance, communist persecutions, the former forced labor camps, where we are trying to give them a topical input. And through these lenses, the future journalists, the young leaders in media, are basically covering these sensitive topics and bringing them up in their own new perspective. This all is, of course, being done in a close conjunction with established media and experienced journalists who do supervise the work of these young students. So it's a mutual learning process, it's a constant learning process, and it's very practical and very vocational.
So how are you preparing journalists that are being trained at your incubator for times of crises? We can talk about the war in Ukraine, we can talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, or even the climate crisis. What skills do they need to be able to report on these issues?
Well, absolutely. These are the absolutely crucial questions. And what we see today is an urgent need for these kind of skills. It's omnipresent, right? So what we are doing is, we are organizing weekly sessions with the established journalists, and we're tackling them with exactly these questions. So we're typically asking, like, how does your media operate these times? So we're operating together with the universities in the Czech Republic that provide the theoretical training. And in our sessions, we are providing the day-to-day routine. We are bringing them closer to the situations in the media outlets, and we're sharing the perspectives of the people who are, for instance, right now in Ukraine. Some of our students are even practicing their jobs right now in the borders, for instance, with Ukraine, where they are covering the daily life and the fleeing migrants, for instance, the refugees from Ukraine. So this is what we do.
Let's talk about investigative journalism and digitalization. Have digitalization and technology made the work of investigative journalists easier, or have they actually made the work more complicated because now it's so simple for anybody to spread fake news and misinformation online?
Well, most probably as expected, it's both, right? It's partly easier and partly more difficult. We're in touch with the leading investigative journalists in the country here that just, for instance, managed to contribute to the installation of some of the really big corruption cases and figures connected with corruption here. And these people are telling us basically repeatedly that technologies are making their communication with their senior colleagues, for instance, in abroad, much easier. But at the same time, they are under bigger threat because there is, of course, the big brother watching them, and they're being constantly checked. And what they're doing, especially in the field of investigative journalism, is definitely nothing secure. So they really need to be very careful with what amount of information and sensitive information they are, for instance, storing online.
We also know that investigative journalism is not cheap. Journalists need to invest more time. They need to really go out there and search for information that sometimes is not easy to access. So how would you convince newsrooms, especially those with a small budget, to still have a unit or at least one person who is responsible for investigative stories?
There is several strategies for that. There is either the way of individual supports. There may be like private donors who are helping these little offices and little media to survive and basically sustain their work through individual financial supports or backing them up with, I don't know, premises or technologies, for instance, licenses, stuff like that. Apart from that, we have here a very nicely rooted now foundation for the independent journalism that is operating as a really an independent body providing support to individual journalists as well as whole media outlets who, thanks to their work, I mean, this foundation, they can really focus on what they're doing in an extensive way. And you're absolutely right there that this is taking a lot of time, a lot of efforts, and one can hardly ever predict how long it will actually take before a story is really prepared and covered in order to be ready for publishing. So they are supported through these kind of initiatives. Independent foundations supporting independent journalism are a crucial tool. And last but not least, I would very much underline the role of the so-called media of public service. That is something that not every Western democracy is in favor of, but as we see typically on the big media state houses like BBC or Yle in Finland, for instance, they do an excellent job because they provide the umbrella to individuals who can continue in their investigative work and be rather safe under this umbrella. So we would typically mention here the Czech television and the Czech radio. They are these media of public service doing, in my opinion, a wonderful job.
Tomas, thank you very much for being our guest today on GMF Talk, and thank you to our viewers and subscribers for watching. Of course, we'll continue to bring you interesting guests from the world of media and communication, so make sure you subscribe to our channel to not miss out on anything. I'm Liz Shaw. See you next time.